Morning.
Okay, you feel about like I do in the morning. All right, I'm going to do the morning brachas. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'suk b'divrei Torah. Varevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'fidu b'fiyavcha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzenu v'tze'etzeim ha-beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodeh shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamlamei Torah le'amu Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu torato. Baruch atah Adonai notenu Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Blessed art you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Please, Adonai, our God, sweeten the words of your Torah in our mouth and in the mouth of your people, the family of Israel. May we and our offspring and the offspring of your people, the house of Israel, all of us know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed art you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed art you, Adonai, God, King of the universe, who has selected us from all the peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed art you, Adonai, Hashem, giver of the Torah. Okay.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. So we're going to just hit on the Mishnah Brura now. And the section is in 184 of the Mishnah Brura, as well as 184 in the Shulchan Aruch, and chapter 8, verse 12 of the Rambam, and Gemara Brachos 20b. And that's it. This seems to be jumping a little bit, guys. I'm not sure. We were on 225 and it's gone back to 185. But Rabbi Daniel Brody knows what he's doing, and I don't. So I'm going to go with what he suggested. Okay. So the topic is if you're not sure whether you've benched or not. So Bikata Mazon, which is the long benching that follows bread, is a Torah commandment, and it's different from almost all the other brachas, which are rabbinic in nature. When one is unsure whether one has fulfilled a Torah mitzvah or not, one must do it again. However, one can only do Bikata Mazon again if one's still full from one's meal. If one is not full and is unsure that he benched, he must not bench. Rather, he should wash without a bracha, make a motzi, then eat an olive size worth of bread, a kazayit, and then bench on it. But because almost all other brachas are rabbinic, whether one is unsure that you made it or you haven't made it, one does not make a new bracha. This is a very important rule. When it comes to brachas, when in doubt, leave it out, except Bikata Mazon, because it's deraisa. Okay? Now, as far as woman is concerned, it's not clear from the Gemara whether a woman's obligation to bench on bread is a Torah mitzvah or a rabbinic mitzvah. Based on this, if a woman is unsure whether she benched bread or not, and it's unclear whether she has to bench again, that said, a woman who does bench has certain halachic authorities to rely on, but what would be better, though, is to eat more bread and re-obligate herself in the new benching. So what it's saying is that clearly you don't want to say a bracha in vain, but if it's deraisa like Bikata Mazon, just to be safe, if you're not full, you have to fast without a bracha and then eat a kazayit of bread, and then bench again. So you're not wasting a bracha. Okay, so that's really straightforward and clear. We're going to hit the daf. Kevin, you still there, even though we can't see you?
Yeah. See, that's well, the expression in benching is bachalta v'savata, which means you're satisfied, huh?
Exactly. It depends on the chef. No, I'm kidding. So you're absolutely correct. So what we did is we ended off on the 16th daf, on 16b4, and what we were basically discussing, guys, is that there was an academy, a special academy set up for learning in King Chizkiah's name. Now, basically, there's a dispute of what goes on. So this is the dispute. Rav Nassan and the sages disagree about the time length. So one party says it remained there for 3 days, and on 17A1, where it goes, as it says, and one party says 7 days, and others say that it remained there for 30 days. So we have 1 day, 7 days, and 30 days. Now, before I go on, why the significance of these 3 days? What do you think, guys?
Pause.
Okay. Arthur, Kevin, do you want to take a stab?
Pass.
All right.
I mean, I can guess.
Well, take a guess, yeah. It's
Well,
like,
one is a whole number which represents a day. 7
Okay.
days is a cycle of a week, which is
Okay.
effectively all days of the week. And 30 days is basically a month of the lunar calendar, and represents it represents days in different contexts, but all the days relevant to our year, our Jewish year.
so I
Right.
think your answer does tie in as to why the actual answer given might tie into your answer, and I'll tell you why. Because
Right.
if you look at the halakhic days of mourning, when I lost my mom, your first day is obviously, it goes into halakhic stages of mourning. So for some reason, it wasn't set up for 12 months in this particular case. But I think the reason why it wasn't is it's not incumbent upon you to mourn for non-relatives past a certain period of time. So if you look at how long that the Jewish people mourned for Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, there is a certain quota limit if it's not your own family, right? And the 3 stages of mourning are generally one day. I mean, you see,
No,
even
it's 3 days. 3 days.
No, I'm getting there. I'm
Okay.
saying the most intense day is the
No.
first day in terms of the shock factor, because that's the day of the funeral. That's the actual day of the funeral. So that's counted as the first day, whereas there's a funeral and the levaya, and there's a hesped, a eulogy, etc. on that first day, and there's prayers. Then you've got the 7 days of severity where you've got prayers every night. Okay, obviously broken by Shabbos. And you've got the 30 days of mourning. So that's according to the Maharsha and then Nimukei Yosef. But Mark, what's corresponding in a way to what you said is that there is a cyclic reference to the fact that I'm sure we mourn based on the fact that there are those, pausatory time periods. So I think it is relevant. So again,
obviously a year is maximum time you can mourn for a relative.
For a relative, yes. So why do you think that time period is for a third party? The first day you attend the funeral of one's friend's parents, or whatever the case may be. For the first 7 days you go to prayers, and after 30 days, I think there's there's more intensity, like when you pray when you at the levaya of a tzaddik, where we prayed for Miriam, etc., etc. So those are the days of. This is what the whole argument is discussing. Okay. And now we're going to find out what exactly the procedure was. So the rabbis taught in a brass, and this comes from the second book of Chronicles, chapter 32, verse 33. I remember mentioning this verse before. So it basically states from that point, and they did honor to him at his death. This refers to Chizkiah, king of Yehuda, before whom 36,000 men went out with bared shoulders. Okay. Now, when I wanted you to ask you guys something specifically, why do you think? Why do you think the verse, for example, mentions Chizkiah explicitly? Because it could be mentioning a lot of tzaddikim. Again, let me just tell you the context how this was mentioned. In the 16th daf, it was talking about Chizkiah and what this basically means to be buried with the greats. Does that mean? Does that make sense? Remember, we spoke about this whole Mishnah that it was the Aliyah, and the word Ma'aleh and Aliyah means the highest level. So the fact that he was buried with David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech means that he was of that caliber. It was the finest members of Klal Yisrael. Obviously, he's not going to be buried in the cave of Machpelah. That's for the forefathers. But he was bestowed the highest honor because with the army of Sancheriv, the entire Jewish people were going to be wiped out. And the generation itself didn't merit to be saved without Chizkiah's help. He was a prophet. He wasn't just a king. And what happened is all the soldiers spontaneously combusted internally, and their clothing was not burnt. That's why it was miraculous. It was internal combustion. So what we're saying here is we're mentioning him because he's worthy of this sort of lamenting. Does that make sense? Entire people were saved because of him. So one question I want to ask you guys, when it ever uses the term in the Gemara or the Torah of bare shoulders, what does this mean?
Bare shoulders.
Yeah, in other words, what it does with
what does it symbolize?
Yeah, in other words, it said, before whom 36,000 men went out with bare shoulders. It's actually quite literal. With bare shoulders. What does this mean?
No protection. I mean, no protection, no.
Okay.
No, sorry.
So what happens when you go to the Beit HaChayim, when you lose a parent? You remember Arth, from when I went with you to your mom's funeral, etc. They tear your clothing and then they rip it. So what happens is you take a shirt, you wear a t-shirt generally underneath. They don't, but there they had one item of clothing. So as they basically tore the fabric and they rip it for their mourning, your shoulders hanging bare. That makes sense. Once they've cut it for you to. So it's not figurative. Literally 36,000 of the men were mourning. And why 36,000 is because there's a symbolism according to Tosfot and Maharal on the numerical value, which for him has a numerical value of 36, meaning it wasn't just that they were mourning somebody, they were mourning him specifically. That's how important they emotionally felt about him. So there it goes on, and it says, this is the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Rav Nehemiah said to Rav Yehuda, but they did the same before Achav. Now, why? Who's ringing? Guys, somebody's phone's ringing. Oh, Arthur's disappeared. He's answering his phone. We'll just hang on a sec. All right, it's not the end of the world, guys, if you need to answer the phone in an emergency. I understand. Sometimes you've got emergencies. All right, so Marco, Kevin, are you still there?
Yeah.
I thought it's kind of like God. We know he's there. We just can't.
No, we're very much here. We're listening.
No. I don't see Kevin's physical screen. That's why I didn't know if Kevin was still there. I'm looking.
I'm still being, you're talking about Hezkiah and the 30,000 at his funeral.
So basically, Rav Nehemiah said to Rav Yehuda, but they did the same before Achav. Now, what's he trying to say? Who was Achav? Do you remember?
Yeah, he was he was Aaron's son, wasn't he? Who went forward and the incense and got frizzled. No.
A king.
He was a king. And what sort of king was he?
Oh, sorry.
He didn't have a good reputation? I don't know.
That's the mildest way you could have said it.
You say it be politically correct, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the most wicked king. He caused a huge amount of destruction. He was involved with idol worship. You know, it was very difficult for them to dethrone him. And what Rav Nehemiah is basically saying is to Rav Yehuda is they did the same sort of thing. There were like 36,000 of the top men. They tore their shoulders and they mourned for him as well. So why is this such a testament in terms of Chizkiah? Because Chizkiah was a king. In other words, this is the honor you accord to a king. How does this show necessarily like they loved Chizkiah? In other words, if you're doing this for a king, and Achav was a king who was wicked, Chizkiah was a king. But how does this show that they loved him or they honored him if they did the same thing to a wicked king like Achab? Does that make sense? So it's a good question. So the Gemara answers, okay, rather the exceptional honor according to Chizkiah, that was that they put a Torah scroll on his beard. Now, we need to know what this means. I don't know if you guys know what a beer is.
Only the ones we drink.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it, Kev? Do you know?
A coffin.
Okay, so a bier is a stand on which a corpse, coffin, or casket contains a corpse is placed to lie in a state to be carried to the grave. Okay, so it's a device in which dead bodies were placed. So you know when they lift a dead body and they place it on everybody's shoulders and they walk with a body, that's a bier. It's almost like a stretcher, but it's very ornately done, where it's got huge kavod, where they put the kavod on top of that. That's what a bier is, B-I-E-R.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, they put a Torah scroll on his bier. And then they said, this person fulfilled what is written in the scroll. So the Gemara asked, but nowadays as well, we do the same thing. That is, we bring out a Torah scroll at the funeral of a great person. Now, before you guys ask that it doesn't seem to make sense, because today we've never been to a funeral at West Park where they take out a Torah scroll for a great person. We're talking about a response they had at the times of the Gemara. Does that make sense? Not at the times of now. So in those days, for tzaddikim, they did the same thing. They took out a Torah scroll at the funeral of a great person. So what the response is here is, okay, we understand he was a great person, but we do the same thing for tzaddikim now. So in other words, he was buried like a king, and they said even like Achab, with 36,000 men that pulled their shoulders. And we were saying, but what distinguished him from Achab in terms of the way he was honored? And they said, no, they put a Torah scroll on his beard. And then the response in the Gemara is, but we do it nowadays, meaning in the Gemara days time, not today. And we put a Torah scroll on the beard. So what makes him unique? So then the response is that there is an alternative answer. And if you wish to answer, nowadays we also put a Torah scroll on the beard. We do not say this person fulfilled what is written in the scroll. Okay? And the Gemara offers a third approach. Rabbi Bar Chana, I'm serious, he's got the name Bar twice. Rabbi Bar Chana said, I was once walking alongside Rav Yochanan to ask him about the preceding matter when he entered the privy. And upon his reappearance, I put the matter before him, but he did not answer us until he had washed his hands, put on tefillin, and made the blessing. Okay? Now, do you know what a privy is as a matter of interest?
Not really.
Something private.
That's exactly it. If you're privy to certain information, Michael, it means you allowed exclusive use of it and no one else. If you have the word privy or private or salon privier in the casino, it means that it's an exclusive place where only you are entitled to enter, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So once he'd been prepared himself and made the blessing, at that point he answered them and said, nowadays we even say this person fulfilled what is written in the scroll, but we do not say he taught what is written in the scroll. At the funeral of Chizkiah, they even said that he taught what is written in the scroll. So again, the Gemara brings three different arguments. The first thing is right. 36,000 men tore their shirts and mourned for him. And they say that's incredible. But that might have been done for a king, because it was even done like a wicked king, like Achab. It then says, but they put a Torah scroll on his beard, which, Arthur, in case you missed it, is a special device to carry the coffin. Like they put it on your shoulders, and it was almost like a stretcher, with like a very ornate sort of stretcher where it stabilized the coffin, etc. And we're saying, but in certain times of the Gemara, they also put a Torah scroll. So the response is, it never used the word, he fulfills the Torah, as referring to Chizkiah. Does that make sense? It said, okay, but we take out the scrolls now for other people. We have. And then the response to that is, but there was never a declaration that said he fulfilled the words of the Torah. So they're saying, okay, that does elevate him. And then there were other people in the Gemara said, listen, for certain tzaddikim, we also have said the word, he fulfills the words of the Torah. And the Gemara's third alternative answer to that was, in addition to that, they said he taught the words of the Torah, which was an honor only accorded to him. It means you had to be of a level of almost prophecy to be able to teach on that level. So they're saying whatever you think he did that was normal, everything that could be done for a person in terms of honor was done for him. But what was the cherry on the cake that they did for him compared to that they didn't do for anybody else? Was not the funeral procession, which no matter all the bells and whistles that you have, and in those days you used to hire people to cry for you. You had professional wailers and people that would do eulogies. It was a big thing. It was organizing a wedding. It was like organizing a wedding. And in fact, one of the rabbis of the Gemara, I don't know if you know this, they actually put a cap on how much you could spend on a burial, because it got as ornate as weddings today that have gotten out of proportion. And I have to mention this in this show, because basically people that are trying to marry off their children can end up getting into 2 years of debt to please everybody else, and they still complain. I had to sit next to this person. The chicken at this wedding was better. People are insane. What they should do is they should give everybody falafels and pita and buy their kids an apartment with the money. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I agree.
Spend on a wedding.
Tell my ex that, the mitzvah. Yeah.
Exactly. And can you imagine with the wedding how much more ridiculous it's going to get? And the thing of it is, there was a great rabbi that was sick in the Gemara. I must find out what his name was. And he knew he was dying. He said, he said he wanted a simple funeral and it should start with him. And he set the tone where all the stones were the same, where you didn't have all these wailers that you pay. You didn't have these ornate processions, because what happened is the poor people in the middle of the night would dump their dead there because they couldn't afford it. So they dumped their dead in terms of the city streets, nicely with dignity, but they couldn't afford it. They just didn't have the money, and they were embarrassed. And this got out of proportion. This is
I won't mention names, but somebody I know, because with a bat mitzvah, not a bomb, it's a bat mitzvah. During this COVID thing, had a Zoom bati, and guess what it cost? 70 grand.
What?
70,000. Why? Because they hired a band as well. Hired a band. Well, it's a one show actually, but it costs as much as the band. And there were probably hundreds of people watching, and invitations were sent out, and personally, and God knows, I don't know, but I know the number because I know the person. I just say I can't believe it. It's ridiculous.
Why don't they just play a stereo in the background with some classical music?
No, it was all like, and it had to get the vibe going with everybody. So everyone's clapping, and it was just before, it was just, you can't. How can you It's crazy.
Arthur, they should have hired you.
And with people.
They should have hired Arthur to Photoshop in the band and put in the music and the guests. He could have done it for 10 grand.
No, the guy, I think the band gets paid about 10, 15 grand. Yeah.
No. I'm just saying the ridiculousness of it. What do you think Hashem brought COVID for? I'm not saying I don't know the mind of Hashem, but there were a lot of lessons we had to learn. And I tell you, one of the lessons is that instead of spending all that amount on the wedding, you're actually spending your lives together. So it should be a simple wedding. Everybody should partake in the joy. It should be a humble affair. During this COVID, we weren't meant to travel in big numbers. It should be a bit of falafel and shawarma and pita. You should wish the family you should kayach. You should get married on the lowest cost possible and give them a fighting chance to let that money that they would have spent on the wedding to start their lives together.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Michael. Totally. I agree with you totally. Anyway, please God, the world does learn its lesson. I'm not even saying that I know the reason Hashem gave COVID. I'm just saying we can learn many lessons, and one of them is you don't need 200 guests at 1,000 rand a plate. Really. So it's saying that, okay, so all of these things were done for him when he died. But the most important thing was the academy of learning that was set up in his name. The one source said 1 day, the one said 7 days, the one said 30 days. Because that is what's going to carry him on in the next world. Those mitzvahs from that learning that and all the mitzvahs that he did. So that's more beneficial and honoring to the dead departed soul. Okay, so now we're going to hit an argument as to what's more important, Torah learning or actually doing the mitzvah. You know, there's this argument, do you spend more time learning, do you spend more time doing mitzvah? So I want to address this issue, and it's brought up here. So the Gemara challenges the approach. So what it's saying is, but Master has said, in other words, the Master of the Tana, that study of Torah is important because the study of Torah leads to the performance of mitzvahs. So this indicates that studying Torah is secondary to practice. In other words, if you're studying Torah in order to learn and do the mitzvahs, then what's most important is the reason why you're studying Torah is to do the mitzvahs. So that's the one side of the argument.
No, but so the Torah is the first important thing, not secondary.
No. But I'm saying the argument brought forward here in the Gemara is it's actually challenging the approach. Because what happens is how this argument came, it said at the funeral of Chizkiah, they even said that he taught what is written in the Torah scroll. And then the other opinion said, no, it was higher, that he turned around and said, what's more important is that he fulfilled what was in the Torah scroll. So at that point, the argument comes in and says, well, okay, now here's a debate. Which part is more important, that he fulfilled what was in the Torah or that he taught what was in the Torah? So this is where the issue rears its head. Because we're saying, well, what is more important? What was a bigger honor for them to say on his behalf? Am I making sense, guys?
Yeah, sure.
So that's how the argument came about. So the master of the Tana said the study of Torah is more important because the study of Torah leads to the performance of mitzvahs. So this indicates that studying Torah is secondary to its practice. In other words, why are you studying? In order to know how to fulfill the mitzvahs. Okay, so hence the praise to Chizkiah, he taught, which concerns Torah study, is less than the praise given nowadays, saying he fulfilled, which concerns mitzvah performance. So they're trying to clear up this issue of what was a bigger praise for him. So the Gemara says, no, listen, there isn't a difficulty here. The statement, the study of Torah is important because study leads to performance, which implies that study is less important than performance because it's only enabling to you to be able to perform by knowing what to do, refers to learning Torah. This statement we say he fulfilled, but we do not say he taught, which implies that Torah study is more important, refers to teaching Torah. Okay. So I'm just going to explain forward more. So the chapter ends with an Agadic teaching. And what's that teaching? Is it basically says the following: Rav Yochanan said in the name of Rab Shimon ben Yochai, what is the meaning of that which is written? Praiseworthy are you who sow by all waters, who sends forth the feet of the ox and the donkey. This teaching states that whoever engages in studying Torah and bestows kindness merits the inheritance of two tribes, Yosef and Issachar. So now what it's actually coming to say, guys, is that what we're looking at is you can't take these things individual, that it's either this or either that. You want to leave this world a holistic person. So the first thing is the discipline in the study to be able to understand what Hashem wants from us, to be able to almost read into Hashem's will by learning what he wants for mankind. And that fulfills a certain part of your soul. The second part of your soul that needs to be fulfilled is the benefits that others get out of your ingenuity, your uniqueness, and your ability to give to others. And what that part is a part of kindness. And that's why Rav Yochanan said in the name of Rav Shimon bar Yochai, praiseworthy are you who sows all waters, who sends forth the feet of the ox and the donkey. So this basically teaches that whoever engages in studying Torah and bestowing kindness merits the inheritance of 2 tribes, Yosef and Issachar. So it's saying that you're deficient if you only learn or you only do kindness. What you need to do is do everything. Does that make sense? So when we do, for example, a lulav and etrog, remember we learned that we need all sorts of Jews. And there are those Jews that observe only mitzvahs because they're naturally kind-hearted people, but they're not into learning or religion. And there's others that are very fastidious with their ritualistic practice and get up at nights, but their conduct can be a little bit better. So in other words, people seem to work on different areas. But the sweetest one is a person that does both acts of kindness, learns Torah, and becomes a good person. He's not just a religious person. He's a holy person and a good person. It's the combination of both that fulfills a person's benefit to the world, so that you leave the world a better place than you came in. Okay. So on spiritual levels, yes, if you learn Torah, you leave the world a better place than you came in. But by doing actual good in the world, you need to have it manifest on a real level, not just on a holy level, but on a practical level as well. So before we go on to what this verse means, it basically wanted to bring forward in conclusion that the performance of mitzvahs is more important than learning Torah, but teaching Torah is the most important pursuit of all because it causes many people to engage in mitzvahs. This is according to the Mashar. So the preceding verse applies to an accomplished scholar. In that case, an uneducated person, learning Torah is foremost priority so that he knows how to fulfill the mitzvahs. Does that make sense?
There you go, Damon. Yeah, that's your one, Dan.
I'm getting it. But what it's saying is learning Torah is like I'm still a student. So when I learned about this Mishnah Brura, is if you forget that you've benched or not, I often have a safek as to did I do it or didn't I not. So I'm learning here. So as a student myself, when we're learning the Mishnah Brura together, I'm saying I'm learning now. I'm fulfilling better because I've learned better. So I think we can conclude from this that when we do acts of kindness, we learn and we share ideas with each other at a Shabbos table with others. We all teachers. We've all got something to contribute. That's a holistic balance that we involved every second and every day of trying to help other people and to serve mankind. And on that, I want to finish off the shir, and I wish you guys a wonderful day.
Shkach. Thank you, Damon.
All right.
Welcome back, Damon.
Make some money.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Yeah, thanks for getting back safely.
Guys, I've missed you.
Yom Tov.
Yom Tov.